So it is time to take a look at the NFC playoff picture after all these Week 14 games are over, besides the Monday night game tonight, which shouldn't have too much of an impact on things. But the Packers just lost to the Lions. Packers sitting at 9-4. The Lions now sitting at 12-1. And now let me show you the current NFC seeding here from NFL.com. Lions still the 1 seed. Eagles 2 seed. Seahawks 3 seed. Buccaneers 4th seed. Vikings 5th seed. Packers still in the 6th seed, just as it was last week at 9-4. And the Commanders as the 7th seed. And so now when we look at the final 4 games, before this loss to the Lions, there was the hope that maybe if the Packers beat the Lions and a few different things went their way, they could have taken over and potentially won the NFC North. You also have to factor in what would happen with the Vikings. But there would have been a chance for the Packers to do that. Now there technically still is. But for them to win the NFC North, the Packers would need the Lions to lose all 4 of their games, and the Packers would need to win all 4 of their games. Now, I do think it's possible for the Packers to win their final 4 games, but I think the Lions losing their final 4 is not going to happen. So the Packers' chances of winning the NFC North basically are no longer. You also would have to factor in the Vikings as well. So that's unfortunate for the Packers, and so it looks like they're not going to have a chance at winning the NFC North. And so now when we look at the rest of the seeding, it feels like the Packers are probably going to end up as they're going to end up as a 5th through 7th seed because they're not going to win their division. And there's a really good chance they stay right at the 6th seed. And so it does come down to, how the Vikings play. They're currently 2 games ahead of the Packers. So to jump the Vikings, they need to, probably beat the Vikings in the next few weeks when they play them again, and then have the Vikings lose a few games. The Commanders are 1 game behind the Packers there as the 7th seed, and so the Packers, if they want to stay as a 6th seed, need to, win a few games and have the Commanders not be able to, jump up above them. And the good thing is, it looks like the Packers are pretty much a lock to win the playoffs. And I was testing out the New York Times playoff calculator, and even if the Packers lose all 4 of their games, they still have a 28% chance of making the playoffs. And so obviously, let's hope that doesn't happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But even if they do lose out, they still have a chance to make the playoffs because they are 9-4. Now, even if they lose 3 games, they still have a pretty good chance to make the playoffs, just sort of messing around with the calculator here. If they lose 3 and beat the Bears, they still have an 81% chance of making the playoffs. If they lose 3 of their games but beat the Vikings, they have a 78% chance. If they lose 3 of their games, beat the Saints, they have an 80% chance to make the playoffs. And if they beat the Seahawks next week and then lose their final 3, they have a 96% chance to make the playoffs. So the lowest percent chance, even with losing 3 games, would be 78%. So the Packers are in a very, very good spot, at least when it comes to making the playoffs. Now, when you do look at these seedings, the Eagles will probably end up with the 2nd seed. Of course, the Eagles could technically still jump the Lions. Not sure if it's going to happen. It could technically, but if the Packers are the 7th seed, they'll play the number 2 seed, and currently that would be the Eagles. So I think you'd probably rather the Packers play the winner of, one of these other divisions that's a little bit weaker. Currently, the Packers would play the Seahawks in the first round of the playoffs, which will be their next opponent. So this could potentially be a playoff matchup that we will witness this next week if things sort of stay where they are right now, and it's very possible that could happen. Now, the Rams are still competing to win the NFC West, so they could potentially jump the Seahawks. They're currently 1 game behind. But as it stands, the Packers are in a very good spot to make the playoffs. According here to NFL.com, it says playoff probability 96%. And so it really comes down to probably the 6th or 7th seed, maybe the 5th seed. If the Vikings fall down, the Packers could somehow potentially jump them. But regardless, the Packers are probably going to have to start off with a road game and potentially, play multiple road games to make it to a Super Bowl. Now, I think they definitely can win against any team. And even though they lost to the Lions, you did see that they are pretty close to the level of the Lions. The Lions beat them out at the end. I do think the Packers as a team need to get better when it comes to, stopping offenses on final drives. The defense has, had some struggles there like they did against the Bears, even though luckily the field goal was blocked. They couldn't stop the Lions on the final drive when they needed to. I do think getting Jair back soon, hopefully, will allow them to be a little bit better on some of those, key drives. But there are definitely a few things for the Packers to clean up. But that's sort of where it sits right now. They're in a good spot to make the playoffs, and we'll sort of watch how it plays out the final 4 weeks. But if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.